audio behind some of this. Right. Give it a second. Let's see if anyone can hear. There you go, yeah. A little quiet? Okay. Awesome. Thank you guys for your patience. Having a couple of difficulties today. For some reason, my headset is not... My headset's the only audio it's recognizing, so we might have really shitty audio quality for the first time in a while, and I don't know why. All I can think is there was an update, and you guys know how updates go. They fuck everything up. Usually whenever I'm going on YouTube. This will be immortalized forever. Alright. Give me a moment, folks. I'm just going to finish setting this up. Audio check. How's this one sound, folks? We sounding a little better now? I appreciate everyone's patience while we get this set up. It wouldn't be a live stream if there wasn't some minor technical difficulties.
Let me show you.
Audio check 1 2 1 2. Audio check 1 2. Hello, Mossy. Good to see you, my friend. Audio seems to be coming in loud and clear. I just finished the last of my promos, and just like that, hello everyone. Hi. And the last Omnitect, your favorite robot American, and this is Unicorn Head Studios, where I make TTRPGs and run TTRPGs and do all my crazy TTRPG stuff. So thank you all so much for joining me on the next session of Omni Makes Legacy First Flight. Today's session, Session 3, Careers, Not Classes. Hope you're all doing well today, and let's pop on over here for just one moment as I let everybody see my glorious face. Hello everybody. I hope you're all doing well. It's been an interesting day today getting things set up, but we're finally here. I have been working so much. Round the clock on Legacy. I've taken a couple moments to breathe. It is still the holidays, and I need to allow myself the chance to actually enjoy them a little bit. But I am, in fact, working constantly on Legacy First Flight. And as a result, I would be remiss to not take a moment to thank the incredible patrons who make my work possible. So a huge moment to thank my awesome folks at patreon.com/Last Omnitect, Ampersand, Atlas, and Heinrich at my Tier 1, thank you very much. Tier 2, Necronomus and Souls Rolls. And then finally, Tier 3, Mossy the Mighty, currently in chat. Thank you guys all so much. If you guys want to get name dropped, get credits as editors as well as also producers, and finally also want to eventually participate in the TTRPG demo, the beta that I'm going to be doing come the beginning of this oncoming year, please go subscribe. Also, as usual, I do need to take a brief little annoying moment to say, hey, you know what you could do to help the channel grow? Like, subscribe, post a comment below, doesn't matter how frivolous it is. That's how we get the algorithm to notice us. And we're a really small channel. I don't know if you noticed this, I'm under 50 subscribers on this channel. So, you know, rookie numbers. Let's bump those numbers up. So, also want to pop into chat here and see what we got. So here we go. We have Bon Bon, we have Mossy, we have Sailing Ships to Sink. Hey, good to see you. So, that's a great question, Sailing Ships. Classes versus careers. This is a thing that I have debated often when it comes to how to make a TTRPG. 23 is still good, to be honest. Can you imagine 23 people in real life being behind you? Oh no. Let me make a very clear moment here. I'm very honored by everyone's support. Seriously. All of you guys are incredible. But I'll never say no to more, because unfortunately, that's what it takes to get this sort of stuff off the ground. So, the more this stuff gets spread, the easier it is for me to make, and the easier it is for me to make, the easier it is for me to share with you. I can at least promise this much. Anyone out there who's following me, I intend to make and keep my games cheap, affordable, and accessible to everybody. I'm not in it to get rich. I don't think that makes sense. I'm in it because I want to tell stories and share my games and have fun with people. And that has to come first. But, unfortunately, in order to share my games, I do need enough money to print them. So, just saying, a little help on that goes a long way. So, careers versus classes is a topic that I have debated for a long time. This is kind of the archetypal, like, which do you like more? A structured, rigid career path for your character where they know every single detail of what they're going to do? Or more of a freelancery, a la carte kind of thing, where you build your character as you'd like. This is something that everyone's seen multiple times in TTRPGs for anyone who's played TTRPGs. On the one hand, the classic rigid class structure is best identified by the forerunner of most modern TTRPGs, which is Dungeons & Dragons. Infamous for its class-based system, where depending on whether you're a fighter, or a bard, or a sorcerer, or a druid, you have a bunch of preconceived notions about both how you play, and how your character functions, who your character is, even down to what species your character would choose. Other games would be like Pathfinder or Starfinder, as an example, for a rare example of a science fiction one. So, like, these are more rigid class-based systems, on the one hand. On the other hand, looser structure games where they have less of a rigid class system include things like World of Darkness, Mouse Guard, or any Burning Wheel system game. Many others. Savage Worlds immediately pops to mind. I don't recommend playing Savage Worlds anymore. We'll get into that. I had a whole spiel on that later. However, it must be said that this debate is something that I think must be approached game by game. There are some games where a rigid class-based system makes sense. Especially games where the gameplay is focused down to a razor's edge. D&D is really about combat. It isn't actually. Anyone who's played in the games knows 90% of your game is going to be in social or, like, intrigue situations. And honestly, of that 90%, like, a further 90% of that 90% is going to be just fucking around with your friends. More than it is going to be actually rolling dice. So, you know, take it with a grain of salt here. I'm just going to angle that down a little bit so you guys can see me a little better. There we go. It must be said, however, for Legacy, because of the way that I've made this game, I want my players to have the flexibility to play what they want without having to consider a rigid class. I want people to be able to make their characters precisely the way they like. This is, I think, the biggest weakness that a class-based system provides. The biggest weakness that a class-based system brings is that you are stuck to your class. No matter how many options you have, you're still basically walking down a fixed path of precisely how your character's going to function. There are ways, often, to change that. Dungeons & Dragons has multi-classing, as does Pathfinder Starfinder, but these are done specifically because of the limitation imposed by a class-based system. This is to allow people to make a class that they would like out of the existing class framework. So basically, you've installed a railroad, and the next thing you have to do is install junctions to move to different railroads because people aren't satisfied sticking in one railroad. Your class system, therefore, becomes only as effective at creating a character as the people are interested in creating the character structures you've already made. If that makes sense. If I want to sit down and play something that doesn't neatly fall into one of the many subclasses, and depending on how big a game you are, like Dungeons & Dragons or Pathfinder, there's probably many subclasses that offer a lot of flexibility into that. Even then, if I don't fit perfectly into one of those niches, I'm always going to be trying to find ways around it. Who here has played a character in a TTRPG game where they just couldn't quite get what they wanted? Like, not in the sense that they didn't get exactly what they wanted. Everyone knows when you first make a character, it takes time to build them and grow them. But, like, literally you just had to make serious concessions on what your character could do. For me, one of the first things I wanted to do was make a character who used a spear in a game. And in that game system, the spear was terrible, and none of the class options actually benefited it. So I changed. Likewise, I later wanted a character with a whip. That's useless. Same thing with a sickle. And those were character classes that couldn't use those weapons. I just did it because I thought it'd be a good aesthetic. I drew the character with those weapons. Turns out that was not a very smart, intelligent choice at the time. So I had to rejigger it. I think the classes serve a useful tool for archetypal stories. But Legacy is about you. Your character. The one you want to make. Going through their unique adventure. Voyagers are distinct from adventurers in Dungeons & Dragons, because while there is a structure around their adventuring, Voyagers, in fact, are gathered together from all across the galaxy based on their prior experiences with ancient technology, ruin worlds, or chaotic happenings that makes them distinctly skilled and particularly positioned to go into ruin worlds and delve deep. However, at the same time, those skill sets are highly unique. What makes someone capable of surviving a ruin world? Basically, that they've made themselves somewhat competent in a very specific method of survival. And how they do that is up to them. It changes dramatically. And so, as opposed to giving people a rigid, this is how you do it sort of thing, I wanted to give more of a starting package. So, before I leap into that, I want to read the chat here, because this is, in fact, a live stream, for those of you who are in the chat right now. It's good to have everyone here. For everyone who's watching this in the future, you can actually catch these live streams every other weekend at about 1:30 p.m. EST. Keep an eye out. I always tend to put them up about a week in advance, so you can see when the live stream is going. Again, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. You can slap that subscribe button a bunch of times if you're having stress issues. Just make sure you do it an odd number of times so that it stays subscribed. You'll be able to see what I'm doing and what I'm up to. But anyhow, going back to the live chat, sailing ships. Oh yeah, hated not being able to actually hit enemies because even optimized classes are so weak at first usually. But that's also DM versus players. Yeah, that's a game balance thing. It's also just a matter of, like, when people start a game, oftentimes they have an image of what they want for their character. And usually there's that, like, there's the eventual I want to have the vision, the power fantasy. But there's also, like, wanting to start at a certain baseline of, like, aesthetic, which oftentimes you're kind of denied. the distinction between a level 1 paladin, a level 1 fighter, and a level 1 barbarian usually is, are they wearing a leather hauberk or are they wearing nothing? But 9 times out of 10, if you have your standard one, like your standard paladin or fighter, it's probably going to be sword and board. Whatever the sword is might slightly vary, but it's going to probably be sword and board, unless you're going with a particularly heavy weapon fighter. In which case, you and a barbarian have very little that isn't in common. It doesn't really give you that ability to make something that's very distinct out of the gate. You can flavor as much as you want. You can reskin things, as is very common in Dungeons & Dragons. Who here hasn't had a magic weapon in a fantasy setting, and the setting doesn't have, good weapon evolution rules, or the ability to craft or fuse weapons together, so you end up trading up, but you really just sort of pretend your weapon evolved, became more powerful, as opposed to admit the truth, which is, I threw away a magical weapon. Right? So, stress test likes, yeah, huge mood. So this is kind of the structure I rejected for Legacy. I want players to be able to build their characters exactly like they'd like. That does include the opportunity to change direction. If you get into a game of Pathfinder, as an example, and you play, let's say, a Magus, read as Spellblade / Hexblade, if you're a D&D fan, it's roughly about the same. And you're about, level 4, level 5, and you want to leave being a Magus? If you don't like the magic swashbuckling skill set that you get, I hate to tell you this, that's gonna be really hard to, multi-class out of that role at that point. You could, theoretically, it's gonna be a slog. It's gonna be a miserable time. You might end up just redesigning your character and making a whole new character, and just saying my character went to monk school for a while or something. My character decided to stop using magic and now he's just a fighter. But, you'll have to reinvent your character. In Legacy, the goal of having a career is that your character's career represents their prior experience before becoming a Voyager. It's not your class which determines your future. It's your job history that determined your past, which informs what you're about to do. So this is where I'm going to pop over and show you guys a little bit from the Google beta document that I've got. I've actually also got a couple of images here that I will be sharing as well. So give me a moment to wrangle those bad boys up. Just want to make sure I've got those correct. There we go. So we've got one. Don't mind me, we're doing this live, and that means that I'm gonna be finagling stuff. And then we have researcher and negotiator. Beautiful, beautiful stuff. Absolutely love it. Okay, that makes things really simple and easy. And now I can sort of take those and shrink them all down. Lovely. Okay, now you guys can actually see what I'm going to show you. Hello everybody, look at that. That's a giant, giant page. Okay, let's slightly make that a little larger. There we go. So that'll fill the space a little more. Okay. So we're going to go all the way down to our careers in Legacy. So careers in Legacy are different, like I mentioned, than your classes, in the sense that your careers actually don't determine your future. They're more like your past. I'm going to scoot that over a little more so you guys can actually see. There we go. My big head and my big frame get in the way. So, these are the 5 playable... Technically, I guess there's 6, because there's the 6th one here. It just got squeezed out. I'm going to have to fix that, aren't I? Oh, here we go. That's why I got stuck on the wrong page. There we go. I was like, wait, I perfectly balanced that. Yes, I did, actually. I just slightly misplayed that. Ah, boy. Adjusting at this scale is very difficult, though. Hold on. Hold on. We're almost there. 150. Sure, that'll do. 150 is fine. Okay, so this gives you an idea of the classes. Oh my god! I don't know why my mouse is so sensitive. It's fleeing stuff into space. I guess it's because I have over 129 pages in this beta document. That's not even the whole thing. That's why. So, your starting classes are soldiers, operatives, jockeys, engineers, researchers, and negotiators. Again, these represent your character's prior skill sets. Think of them like a starting package, which is what most classes in Dungeons & Dragons and Pathfinder and Starfinder and rigid class system games often are in the first level. It's a starting package, with a couple of options on how to flavor it a little bit towards your liking. The difference is that starting package is on a railroad. Most classes are exactly like I described. It's a railroad. You are on tracks. You will move in this direction. Sure, there's junctions, and you can rotate between subclasses maybe, but ultimately, you're going to be on this track, whatever class you select. Careers, on the other hand, are a backpack and an open hiking pole. So here's what you start with. Here's your starting point. Go nuts. After that, you can build your character exactly like you'd like. So, these 6 classes represent a fair bit of flexibility in and of themselves. The first thing you'll notice for each of these different careers is you will get money. This is current. So, this is the base economy system of the game. Currency. A single charge of current is equal to a single day's wage. The ability to survive for a single day with decent comfort, food, shelter, and a little money saved over. So, that's basically the gist. Depending on what your prior career was, you'll have anywhere from 100 current having been saved in advance to 200 current. You can actually take out a loan during character creation to increase the amount of money you had by up to 100 times what you started with. So if you are, say, a jockey and you take out a loan for 100 times, you can get up to 20,000 credit right at the beginning of the game. And you can use that to buy all your starting gear. You'll have to pay it off, but it's a great way to stretch what you can normally get. Basically, your starting amount of money is what you use to buy your equipment. The next thing you get is licenses. So your licenses here are kind of what allow you to access different aspects of play are. This is where we would get into, like, again, I'm going to avoid using Dungeons & Dragons. I'm going to use at least Pathfinder as the example, because I believe Pathfinder at least is made by a company that I don't loathe on a fundamental level. So this is the equivalent of gaining access to certain types of magic or martial skill sets, that kind of thing. So licenses give you access to a specific method of play. So, as an example, if you play as a soldier, you have access to the surplus armory and also hardsuit training. Now, the surplus armory access literally means you unlock an entire tier of gear. Everyone else starts at civilian level access, which is basically, anytime you see green level gear in the game, which is the starting level gear more or less, that's all civilian level access. You can buy that anywhere. Surplus gear, military surplus is kind of a little bit more expensive, and it's usually also significantly more powerful. So this represents gear that's been recently acquired. It might not be an active warfighting circulation, but it's pretty good. This is the difference between your average person walking around in the United States who may have like a concealed sidearm, which might be like, I don't know, a gun made 100 to like 60, 70 years ago and hasn't really changed very much since, to a person walking around carrying an M16 assault rifle with an underslung grenade launcher from Vietnam era. One is significantly more dangerous than the other. Or like more advanced weaponry. Basically, military surplus is guns you would see in circulation among modern military PMCs. More or less. But that also accesses other more exotic gear as well. You also gain access to hardsuit training. Hardsuits are Fallout-style power armor. Really big, really hefty. So, if you have access to surplus armories and the hardsuit, it means your character can be significantly more armored, durable, and lethal than most other characters would be right out of the gate. At least that's what you have access to. This allows a specifically more aggressive, I'd say like durable playstyle, where soldiers can serve as anchors of fire teams or spearheads, more than other operators who might have only access to research equipment or hacking module or projector rig, where, yes, that license will serve them well in the capacity of being able to use like support abilities, strike from long distances, perform really powerful attacks and abilities, but it might not serve them very well in a frontline situation where having a whole extra pool of health would. So, likewise, jockeys are the only ones who gain access to construct training and aerospace training, which allows you to literally pilot walkers and planes. These are all things that other classes can eventually get. These careers, again, are starting packages, but licenses can be acquired with experience and currency. So, theoretically, if you start as a soldier with surplus armory access and hardsuit training, but eventually you're like, I don't know about you, but I really want to be a Gundam pilot. And so you're like, I guess I'll go and I'll invest in the jockey stuff. Well, you don't need to go and multi-class in a jockey. Instead, you just get yourself an experience bump later on and spend that experience and that money to literally train yourself as either a walker pilot or an aerospace pilot. And now, I can fly a plane, or I can be a Gundam pilot. Metaphorically speaking, mech pilot. We call them walkers, for the most part. Also, I'm going to clarify that very much here. Walker training. Just to make that very clear, there's a distinction between the two. So you can pick up any of these licenses at all. This is just gives you a set of 2 right out of the gate, no matter which career you're starting with. The final thing that each of these careers provides that's particularly useful would be the discipline ranks. So this represents your character's unique background, the training they would get in order to do their job. If you start as a soldier, then it means that your character has some background in militancy or warfighting, even if it's just security. Like, you have some basic combat training, some basic shooting, like firearms training and ballistics, and you can choose to either get an extra +1 in athletics to represent greater physical conditioning, or +1 in ordnance to represent your character's grasp of more advanced weaponry. Likewise, if I was, say, playing an engineer, I can choose to either triple down on engineering, because you can either or engineering 3 times in a row, or I can go with a more diverse character set, where my character is a little more aware, has engineering, and maybe knows more advanced weaponry. So, yeah, that kind of gives you that nice spread. It lets you immediately begin to tailor your experience right out of the gate with your starting package. See, what career would you pick in your universe? Do negotiators get sponsors? That is a great question. Let's roll through them, and I'll tell you which one I want to do at the end. So, I actually do have a character that I've made, an NPC character, but I'll reveal which one I've made for me at the end. So, all the different characters starting with the soldier. So again, I'm just going to literally read this verbatim out of the rulebook because I think it's actually, I think I did a decent enough job explaining these. So, while the job of a Voyager does not explicitly require a capacity for violence, the dangers and threats that a team of Voyagers can face operating on the boundaries of Union space all but guarantee that soldiers are a common hire. For corporate security officers, to formally trained warfighters, to professional militia, soldiers come in all shapes and sizes. Their job, however, is simple. Protect their fellow Voyagers in the field. This can mean fighting off dangerous flora and fauna, warding off pirates, or even engaging the arcane defenses of a ruined world directly when all other methods have been exhausted. To that task, soldiers are authorized to wield the most dangerous weapons in the galaxy, and wear even hardsuit-grade armor systems to protect them in the field. So, pretty standard starting package for someone who wants to punch your problems. The next step is Operator, the next career. Operators share much with soldiers, both are intimately familiar with advanced weaponry and life-threatening peril, yet where soldiers are trained to fight on the front lines, operators work best from a more clandestine angle, often having been corporate spies, special forces, or even guerrilla fighters in their past lives. Some work as snipers, laying silently in cover, offering overwatch to away teams, while others often use stealth field projectors and caution to scout out and outflank or outright avoid potential threats. Some infiltrate electronic systems and use their training to disable cameras or hijack constructs. As such, operatives are given access to some diversity of weapons that soldiers can access, as well as access to military-grade hacking software. So if you want to play a spy, that's your buddy right there. That's your option. It's a great background for folks who want to play saboteurs and sneak thieves. If you are a rogue fan, there you go. Likewise, also, by having access to hacking, it means you have a non-traditional method of attack. Anyone who's familiar with, say, Cyberpunk, just generally speaking, if you remember how hacking can be used damn near like magic to exhaust weapons, burn people out, control their minds, if they have cybernetics, or control walkers or machines, that's very similar to how hacking works. We'll get into hacking later, but that is a gist of it, more or less. Or hunters, for sure. If you're a hunter, that works. Basically, anybody who operates from a specific type of expertise. So that's the operator. The next up is the jockey. The jockey is a fun one. It doesn't really exist in a lot of other games. Even the greatest teams of technicians, combat personnel, and scientists in the galaxy will be of no use without having somebody to fly them planetside. That's the job of your jockey. These pilots crew aerospace craft or constructs, aerospace craft or constructs, and sometimes are commercial pilots, farmhands, mechanized cavalry, or daredevils by trade. Those who pilot aerospace craft find themselves as team bus driver, often escorting teams planetside and standing by to extract them or relocate them when things get hot. Those who pilot walkers, I'm going to clarify this, because they're both types of constructs, so I want to make sure I got that right. Those who pilot walkers serve as a sort of armored escort, using their walkers to protect or carry their team, serving as the ultimate big stick in an away team's arsenal, or heavy lifting gear where industrial levels of muscle are needed. Owing to their careers and pivotal role in Voyager operations, jockeys are trained and licensed to operate both aerospace craft and constructs, even if their background specializes in only one of the two machines. So if you want to be the guy in the mech, or the guy in the pilot, this is your role. Are you a Muro Ray from Gundam? You're a jockey. Are you, I can't remember his name, but Top Gun from Top Gun? Then you're going to want to be a jockey. This is the I want to be a pilot. And whether that's get in the Gundam / get in the robot Shinji, or whether that's Yahoo, I fired all my missiles and dodged a bunch of fire, that's still going to be the jockey. And I recommend that it's very fun. The biggest trick with jockeys is you got to take out a loan, because all walkers and aerospace craft are expensive. So no matter what, you're taking out a near full loan. But in exchange, you start the game with a giant robot or a plane. I can't emphasize enough how cool that is. So next up we have the engineer. Engineers are problem solvers, in most practical senses. When a starship's reactor destabilizes, a construct suffers crippling damage in the field, or the blast doors in a ruined world's vault malfunction and trap the team inside, it's an engineer's job to apply their training and work out an actionable mechanical solution. Often field mechanics, starship technicians, or architects by trade, these Voyagers get their hands dirty with some of the most challenging engineering tasks in the galaxy, and often do so with lives on the line. To that end, they're licensed to work with some of the most advanced technology available to an away team. Hard suits allow engineers to do heavy industrial work in the most hostile environments in the galaxy, while the almost supernatural properties of projector rigs allow Voyagers to do the impossible while operating in the field. So engineers are kind of your overall practical support career. This is the I want to have a frontline, midline mage style character, or I want to be the medic from StarCraft, where my character's moving up with my team, actively supporting them, wearing heavy enough armor where I can survive. If you always like playing the cleric, the engineer is a great place to start. They also have access to all sorts of crazy fun tools, so things like drone racks, engineering rigs, again, hard suits. You have access to a lot of crazy stuff. Engineering rigs are basically Clark's third law magic, more or less. Your character's ability to manipulate the laws of physics to create specific effects using this super specialized projector rig, which uses tensor fields, magnetic fields, and various other scientific equipment to do things like cause objects to spontaneously burst into flames, change their chemical makeup on their body without their consent, so they explode because now they're made of TNT, create terrain out of nothing, freeze things to near absolute zero, create hard light structures in midair. These are the sort of things that a projector rig can do. Incredibly powerful. So if you want to be the mage, or you want to be the support character, like a cleric, or like a second line of defense, engineers are a great place to go. They're a great package to start with. Researchers are the mirror image of engineers. Researchers are not dealing in the resolving the practical, but in the understanding and dissemination of the theoretical. The galaxy is a massive place with many unknowns, and the last complexes of Ruin Worlds have they rank really high up in the category of the strange and the unknown. With professional backgrounds as scholars, scientists, and professors on the vanguard of their fields of study, researchers leverage their knowledge and years of study in fields dealing with alien artifacts, lost technologies, and cataloging the study of the weird. While the laboratories of the bases in operation are often sprawling affairs, the most advanced scientific tools available in the field of researchers' kit is no less formidable. These Voyagers are licensed to use hacking software and can turn anywhere into their laboratory with the use of a projector rig. So remember the way I said if you wanted to play more of like a support or anchoring kind of magical / support character, and you would play the engineer? If you just want to play the straight up wizard / alchemist kind of figure, that's what the researcher represents. The researcher has access to hacking and the projector rigs, which means they can literally reach into an opponent's technology and just mess it up. Make guns overheat, make mechs eject their pilots, make people's optical sensors or hard suits fill with caustic smoke. All sorts of fun details. And projector rigs don't even need to fuddle with other people's technology to do it. They can literally alter the laws of reality around them, with the understanding that you're also a little more exposed than, say, a hacker's more subtle ability would be. So if you really want to play around with the more crazy, juggling, insane abilities in the air sort of thing, Researcher's a great career to start with. The final career is the Negotiator. Despite the highly romanticized careers and vastly valuable skills, Voyagers often run into trouble that takes a lighter touch. This is the purview of Negotiators. They're trained in negotiator colleges. These Voyagers undergo years of training in the arts of persuasion, diplomacy, and manipulation, giving them all the tools to disarm dangerous situations. With experiences as hostage negotiators, contract lawyers, and merchants, negotiators end firefights with a timely called ceasefire, or compel enemies to surrender or capitulate through promises of reward or threats of retribution. Gunfire often ceases when a negotiator raises their voice. While these social skills are their primary armament, to assist them in the field, negotiators are licensed to wield advanced weaponry to defend themselves. So, negotiators are kind of my take on the classic bard-esque archetype, but like, as opposed to dude with a lute that sort of makes people to punch better around them, negotiators instead take a front-line approach. They are party leaders oftentimes because they're very good at negotiating and finding terms. They're very good at being the face character. And also, unlike a lot of other instances of the bard-esque character, these folks actually use their persuasion as their primary tool. By using what's referred to as negotiator axioms, these are basically the verbal equivalent of magic. Your character understands people's social attitudes and the norms of the world around them so well, they can literally leverage the situation into a you must accept this kind of thing. To make an example of how that would work, think of it as like when someone couches a situation in a way that you can't not answer a certain way. Like if I were to walk up to someone and say, hey, do you want Chinese or do you want pizza? That's an open question. You can answer that either way. If I walk up to someone and say, hey, do you want disgusting-ass Chinese, or do you want to be a normal person and order pizza? I've already couched that conversation with a very clear leaning towards what I want. Now imagine if I was skilled enough to do that without giving away my hand, or making you immediately go, that's kind of fucked up. That's pretty much what a negotiator does right out of the gate. Hey, AZ, good to see you, buddy. Much love. So that is the power of negotiators. Those are our 6 starting careers. Again, these are your starting packages. After this, you can a la carte whatever upgrades you want onto your character with experience and coin. You are not locked onto anything. Instead, you have a vast open selection of options through which to choose what you want to do. So say you start with a negotiator and you're like, I really liked shooting the guns my negotiator came with at the beginning. Maybe I want to go soldier. Okay. Cool. Well, you don't need to cross over into soldiers by multi-classing. Instead, just invest a little bit more into maybe getting a license for a hard suit, or increase the weapon access you have, maybe buff up your character's durability stats a little bit, take some combat traits, and your character's basically a soldier already. So this gives you some pretty convenient ways of like vacillating between your roles. Now, Bon, you asked which character would I choose? Which class would I choose? I should say, which career would I choose to start my game with? Well, you guys have already seen my character. The first character I ever designed for me was a character I call Gallant. Gallant is a synthetic, and specifically, researcher. That's right, this boy here is my character. So, if anyone's ever been curious as about, like, oh, what would Omni play? Well, Omni would play a researcher. That's me, but that's because I very much like the bookworm style character. I've played all sorts. I have a character for each class at this point. I think they're all really fun. I think what matters is you go with something that you find compelling. That's always the most important part of any TTRPG. I've done my best to make each of these characters valuable and useful in different ways, as well as also have a role in combat encounters when they come up. But again, you can customize your character exactly the way you want with time. So if you start as a researcher and you find that the power fantasy of a researcher doesn't quite fit what you want to do, then it just means that your character had a background in being a researcher. And you can very easily shunt your experience and wealth into changing your career trajectory into something else. You're not locked into this. This is just where you started. So, this is kind of one of the reasons why when I talk about Legacy and I talk about how classes and careers and what I think each one's value is, that's where I approach it from. I'm very much the kind of guy that I like to make exactly what I want. I want to be able to perfectly tweak every aspect. I'm the guy that when I play Armored Core, I open up the big menu. The really big menu. I'd be the guy who plays Elden Ring and looks at all the stats to find the exact way I want to play. And not just that, I want to also look exactly the way I want to look. I want to customize exactly what I want to customize. And as a result, this allows you to build what you like. But if I was to play a character first, if someone were to ever run Legacy for me, which I hope one day they will, I will gladly dust off Gallant. I suspect he'll be my first character. So, that gives us a little peer behind the screen. As far as updates go, I should talk about updates. I've been, as I mentioned, working constantly at Legacy as of late. And one of the toughest parts of making a TTRPG, in my experience so far, has been getting the rules down. I'm very good at off-the-cuff world building, and committing that stuff to paper is pretty straightforward. Honestly, my usual issue is I need to edit it down, not writing it in the first place. Rules, on the other hand, that's tougher. So, the core rules of Legacy are done, but I've already started breaking them down into different subsections, and I need to finish codifying those core rules. So, to start, I've begun working on what I'm calling the Arsenal, which is one large part of the book. It's a very big, thick part of the book. This is where all your gear would go. Everything from your projector rigs, to your guns, to your armor, to your mecha/aerospace craft, all of it fits in this area. So I've been working bit by bit on expanding the system. For starters, and you guys have probably seen this image before, I'm going to expand it so it's a little more visible, but this is a mock-up of what the eventual, pages for weapons are going to look like. My goal is to make them look kind of like catalogs you would find, like actual catalogs from gun manufacturers. And so, each of these is going to have the weapon family name, the type, a couple of manufacturers with the bonuses and a little bit of lore about them, and also 3 of the weapons on the side in increasing rarity, basically, how more powerful they are. So you would have a civilian model, a surplus market model, and a military grade model. I've also begun to work on all the different manufacturers over the past week. Every single one of these is a manufacturer that makes weapons in my setting. Weapons, armor, equipment, what have you. And each of them has different tweaks that would apply to weaponry. So if I were to get a laser rifle made by Skyward Forge LLC, an Acris enterprise, they make Seeker weapons, which have the Seeker rule and the Continuous rule. They tend to primarily focus on energy weapons, and compared to an off-the-stock shelf model of a generic brand style laser rifle, they tend to be more accurate and have a higher armor penetration. Whereas if I was to say go with a Starfall Tech Works, which they're also an Acris company, they make stab weapons. Stab weapons have the Augur rule and the Continuous rule. Seeker lets you sort of seek out targets like Darkseid's Omega beams from DC. It's little micro-seeking laser beams that do the Tron light cycle angles until they find a target and then burn into them repeatedly. Impossible to escape from and very dangerous. Stab weapons, on the other hand, don't seek out their targets, but instead punch through walls to capture them. More of a hit-scan wall hack style gun, where you can literally line up your shot against someone on the other side of an objective or on the other side of a wall, piece of terrain, an enemy, and punch through it like a drill, hence Augur. Those weapons tend to have higher AP and higher damage ratings, so less accurate but with more oomph. This is just one little peek at the different types of manufacturers. At the moment, I've made it so that every single species, and there are 8 playable species in Legacy at the moment, have at least 2 manufacturers. And for the record, this is just what I'm starting with. I want to make this very clear. You folks, when you're running the game, are running as valid a canon version as mine is. This is not the Forgotten Realms, where everything has been written, and there's only one way to play the setting. In fairness, there's plenty of ways to play Forgotten Realms, but you're not going to have to rely on a source book for every single detail. I'm building a framework for you guys to build off of. I've already done a lot of legwork, but if you want to make a totally new manufacturer that has their own unique benefits, their own unique buffs, please do. I'm leaving you plenty of space. This is a galaxy with trillions of individuals. Trillions. And literally hundreds, thousands of worlds that have all been occupied with their own subcultures and communities. Some of these aren't even corporations. Technically, Starfall Tech Works is actually a collaborative commune. They literally are several dozen groups working in tandem to build weapons because eventually they want to overthrow the military junta on their world and replace it with something new. Whereas Skyward Forge is actually the company of the state. It's barely a business at all. It's basically a command economy infrastructure tool. There's plenty of other groups across the galaxy with lots of different approaches of how they make things and what their style is. So go ham. Make what you want to make. And let me know what you make. I'm interested to see what you build in my setting. As far as I'm concerned, all your timelines are yours. Your universe is your universe. It's as valid as mine. My characters, my setting might be, my version of it, might be the prime variant, but your worlds are just as important and to be made for you. Yeah, exactly, AUs. You guys go nuts with that. Everyone have fun making your own AUs. Lord knows we all do. So, in addition to making all of the manufacturers and working out the fluff for each of them and what they all do, why they do what they do, I've also begun to lay out each of the different weapons for each different archetype. So we have marksman rifles here, have been completely finished from the civilian market variant, the surplus variant, and eventually the bleeding edge variant, which is the highest and most powerful of weapons in Legacy to start off with. So this includes the Argos marksman rifle, your literal off-the-shelf baseline weapon system, designed to be given to colonists across the galaxy, everything from hunting to scaring off more dangerous flora and fauna from your encampments to just a utility tool. The marksman rifle is a great place to start with that. It's a great single-shot semi-auto, hits pretty decently well with decent penetration, and a solid range gun. It's pretty good for that. The Cerberus is the next level up. It's significantly more heavy-hitting, has a much higher penetration, same range, but slightly more ammunition as well. In exchange, you go up from a 5 current gun to a 1500 current gun. Things become expensive very quickly, but that's because, again, these are warfighting weapons officially, not just some random tool for around the house that you can pick up. Finally, you finish off with the Zodal Marksman Rifle. These things are so heavy, they're so good at killing things, they're basically little heavy weapons. They actually detonate bombs underneath their impact. Basically a bolter, for those of you who are 40k fans. Fire a shell, it hits a target, it explodes once it gets past the outer layer of the target's defenses, that first layer of resistance, but then that explosion triggers well, I should say it's really an implosion. Creates an implosion, which then triggers a critical mass core in the shell, which causes a much larger explosion. So you're basically shooting someone with a bullet, and then the bullet turns into 2 consecutive bombs. One's a depth charge, the other is a pipe bomb. Imagine the damage and the injury. These things cost 5,000 current. This represents a steady increase. Likewise, also, as I mentioned before, there's a significant amount of customization in your gear and equipment in Legacy. You can forge your gun exactly the way you want to. They have the ability to mount mods, many different mods, and I have been working on many different mods for each of the different weapons. I'm going to expand this out a little bit so we can see it a little better. There we go. I've been working on plenty of different mods for many different things. Everything from weapon optics to weapon frames, to reserve modifications to change the type of ammunition you're using, to custom munitions, generally speaking, to weapon overhauls that completely change how they function. Whether that makes them easier for one particular species to carry them, or they allow you to modify an existing weapon with a unique trait. Either way, all this has been put into the system, and it's already steadily being whittled through. This past week, I've been focusing almost all of my efforts on constructs. Again, we were talking about this before, but these are the walkers, the large craft that jockeys pilot. Everything from aerospace craft, which are a little more what you'd imagine them to be like actual planes, to, yeah, you know, a little bit less of that. So if I open my aerospace section here, so some of these you guys have already seen images of. These are old doodles I've done, but they serve as a pretty good basis. So we have the Galapagos, the Cricket, and the Falsetto as 3 of the starting aerospace craft. And there's also the 4th aerospace craft, which would be, if I can get back here a little bit to our Stellar Forge section. Here we go. The Razorwind Air Superiority craft. Each of these are just 4 of the starting aerospace craft, and they all do different things. So if I were to go all the way down to the constructs, we have our walkers. So right now, I have 6 walkers in the game. These are the starting mechs you can get. They are all pretty diverse. Some of them are a little more expensive than others. So we have a couple military surplus ones. The 2 being the Vassal, which is a plantigrade walking mech, which is exactly what it sounds like. It is specifically designed, as I fix this. Hold on. There we go. It is a plantigrade walking mech, which means it walks like humans do. So we have the Vassal, and then at the other end of the spectrum, we have the Shade, which is another military surplus mech. This one's a float wing. Literally a hovering mech. Very nimbly-pimbly. Think Zone of Enders, and you're not too far off, for those of you who get that reference. The rest of them include, going from top to bottom, we have our plantigrade. The civilian markets include a digitigrade walker, the Nemesis, a Sojourner class walker, which is made by a Sylvan corporation, known as Wanderforge. They're a hexapod mech. You have the Reliac, which is a gyro wheel. Think the giant roly hamster ball mechs from Star Wars, the Hailfire droids, and you're really close to it. And then finally, you have the Atlas Walker, which is actually a tread leg, basically a tank at that point. So it's less of a mech and more of a tank with articulating treads. And then finally, you have the Shade. So those are our 6 options here for aerospace for walkers. Each of them has a different manufacturer. They have different behaviors. We have our core attributes here. modularity, which tells you how many systems you can slap onto it, as well as the cost. Most of them tend to be in, again, the tens of thousands of current. This is just a baseline, and it requires a lot of expense to actually afford a mech. So, ask any jockey, ask Ampersand D20 next time you see them, about how expensive it was to get a mech in the setting. Cost a lot. Still costs a lot. So, we got through our mechs and our aerospace craft here, which, again, we have 4 aerospace craft, which are broken down into the classes of landers, pretty much rugged, super durable vehicles designed to go up and down the gravity well. The Ford Tacoma, or I should say the Toyota Tacoma of aerospace craft. It's basically a pickup truck that happens to fly into space. Less of a weapon platform, but really good at hauling stuff and really rugged and durable. Pretty slow, though. We have aerospace skiffs, in this case the Cricket, which is a super nimbly-pimbly private yacht, basically designed to move quickly at great speed. It can carry a little bit of stuff, but its primary focus is being quick. These are your blockade runners, your really fast, punch through anyone's defenses, evade enemies kind of craft. They're not really good at fighting in the traditional sense. They only have a limited amount of modularity and thus not many weapons or systems can be put on them. But they're faster than nearly anything in the game, and they're really, really hard to hit. So this is the, if you want to play the AC tank, this is it. Next we have the Falsetto, which is a gunship. Gunships are heavily armored, more like roving helicopters than anything else. These are the ornithopters from Dune. These are the Scorpion aircraft from Avatar. The really like heavily armored Huey aircraft or Apache helicopters we see nowadays. That's pretty much a gunship. It's not that fast. It's faster than it's faster than a lander, but its primary focus is to roll up with way more guns than anything would have any reasonable reason to have, and light an area up for a pretty significant sum. And finally, we have an aerospace superiority craft in the Razorwind, which is an Acris-made mech. Air superiority interceptors, as they're often referred to, just an aerospace interceptor, are the second fastest things in the sky, faster than anything but the skiffs, which are specifically made to be private, high-performance, high-speed craft. But these things are made to fight. They are almost incapable of carrying anything transport-wise. They basically can barely carry anything at all. However, and I'm going to actually fix this right now, so this is going to have only 4 transport slots. Shouldn't even have that many. Actually, I think it's just 1 pilot, isn't it? Yeah, it's just 1 pilot. We'll say 1 pilot and 1 transport slot. Just be nice. You can have enough, like, for your personal pack. Or for, like, a single person to sit behind you, maybe in a tandem cockpit. These things go incredibly quick. They hit really hard. They're hard to hit, but their big thing is they're designed to dogfight, and dogfight very well. So if you want to be the AC tank that hits like a brick, then this would be what you want to go with. So we have 6 subtypes of walkers, 4 subtypes of aerospace craft, and I have begun to move on to the weaponry of these different types of craft. So the weaponry is very similar to what your character carries on foot, as a general rule of thumb. Basically the same types of stats. We're going to use the 56th iteration Atun field gun. And yes, that is a joke picked up, and a little inside thing that I'm throwing in from those of you who've been following the Blades in the Dark campaign that Ampersand D20 has been running and that I have been playing in. Atun is such a useful skill, and I figured that for a Shriekish character, Atun would also be a name of an excellent ancestor. So in this case, the 56th iteration Atun field gun. Atun, Mossy, you know exactly what it is. So yeah, this is actually a Shriekish-made weapon. However, a field gun is a field gun is a field gun. It turns out that pretty much one of the first things anyone who has access to black powder figures out is that you can sling something really fast with enough black powder in a tube. And that's basically what a field gun is. Basically an auto-loading breech fire cannon. These are big, basically mobile artillery. Not quite the kind that fire over the horizon. It's not a howitzer. It's not designed to sling a slug so far that I need a slide ruler to figure out where it's going to land, but it is designed for medium range jousting with other craft. It's pretty good, actually. And I also needed to add this as well, because it also has a useful tool of being an anti-aerospace craft weapon. So, one of the big changes you're going to notice from a mech pilot gun, from a construct weapon like this 56th iteration attuned field gun, and the similar weapon, which if I open up over here, which I will, I have access to multiple tabs. As much as I'm going to hate it, I will do this thing. Here we go. So I'm going to go all the way down to the field gun over here. I just got to wait for this thing to finish loading, because it's taking forever, because it's a big document. There we go. Okay. So if we go to the marksman rifle, which is pretty much identical to that, I'm going to go to 150, expand it out again. Here we go. Okay. So the biggest difference between these two is going to be that the marksman rifle does not have... The marksman rifle here is it hits a little bit less hard. So, for starters, 2d8 plus 2 damage as opposed to 2d8 plus 1 damage. A penetration of 4 as opposed to a penetration of 2. Semi-auto, that's the same. The capacity is 40 for that one, and for this one, the capacity is only 15. So, most of the time, walker weapons have more ammunition. They hit just a little harder than their equivalents on the ground. And by a little harder, I mean, and this is the relevant thing, from a purely stat point perspective. Walkers, anytime that a construct is firing at a normal person, they multiply the result of the damage by 10 after modifiers. So, in reality, it's not 2d8 plus 2 versus 2d8 plus 1. It's 2d8 plus 1 in the standard infantry rifle versus 2d8 plus 2 times 10 in the mech version, if we're shooting at the same target. So, that gives you a relative idea. Besides the slight buff to the stat lines that you guys can see, in addition, I've also had to consider the implications of putting a gun on a robot. Normally, most of the gear in the system has what's referred to as a size rating, which you can see right here. In this case, your standard marksman rifle is a size 3 item. This represents the amount of bulk that it takes up in your character's pack. There are carrying capacity rules in Legacy. This is determined by a combination of your might and your endurance, core stats in the game. Literally two of your 5 core stats determine how much you can carry. And that represents just how much size your character can manage before things are too bulky or too heavy to reasonably carry about. It's not really a metric of either. I debated going with like an actual weight stat. I debated going with an actual size stat. And I realized I'm just going to go with like size as an abstraction of both. Which to me seems like it's a logical meet in the middle kind of point. So size is normally how you have to worry about it. And likewise, the portable 2 keyword means that theoretically you can carry this weapon and use it with 2 hands. So that's pretty straightforward for people on foot. But for mechs, well, mechs get tricky. You see, if I'm in a giant robot, I don't necessarily need a free hand to fire a gun. In fact, actually, rule of thumb is most of the sort of weapons on larger mechs and that kind of thing are anchored onto the mech. Every once in a while you get your Wing Zero style, I carry a Buster rifle, and it has a handle. It is absolutely a thing that still happens. But as a general rule of thumb, most of the aerospace craft and walkers tend to mount their weaponry. And the best example I have for that is actually going to be, and I'm going to pop over here to see if I can find it, because I should be able to. NPC, we're going to go with the Amber Cross, and I'm going to open up, pardon me, ooh, pardon me, that was disgusting. Ugh, gross. We're going to go with one of the baseline walkers in the game. So I'm going to pop over to Constructs, we're going to go to Walkers, and I'm going to go to the Amber Cross. And we're going to open up MacArthur. This is an older stat line, rulebook, but this will do fine as we open up so you guys can actually see what I'm talking about. So, The MacArthur is your pretty much bog standard digitigrade mech. This is a great example of a walker, just like a very simple, easy walker. It's got 2 large weapon pods and has 2 more mounting points on the top, right over here. Those are where most of the guns go. You can absolutely give it something to carry in its little hands, but for the most part, it's mounting the big guns on its shoulders and its arms. So we're not really dealing with people's bulk or size here. The mech is capable of carrying whatever it needs to carry. Instead, we're working with something wholly other. And for that, we need to pop over to... I need to make sure I've got this correct, because this is going to be in Stellar Forge. We're going to go right to the first flight. We're going to open up a current mech sheet right now with one of my favorite player characters. This would be... hold on. There we go. I'm going to close Affinity Photo very quickly. There we go. Okay. This is a Walker mech. This is like a Walker sheet, your standard Walker record sheet. And this is actually the Walker record sheet for the player of Louis Vuitton in my Legacy First Flight TTRPG actual play. If you're curious about how my game plays, or you want to actually see that game being played, you don't mind us being a bunch of crazy goobers, go check us out inside of this channel. I have a playlist of every single of the Legacy First Flight streams we've run on YouTube. I wish we had all the ones on Twitch, but that's been impossible to collate. So we're just picking up where we picked up here on YouTube, and I think it's been pretty fun. So Louis is a jockey and a sylph, and he actually has a shade, a heavily modified shade. So in order to figure out how mechs can work and carry weapons, instead of determining how many hands they can use, because sometimes they have manipulators, sometimes they don't, they often just have a modularity number. The modularity stat tells you exactly how many weapons or systems you can mount on your mech. These aren't all guns or melee weapons. Sometimes they're just technical tools. Maybe you want radar. Maybe you have an additional battery or an energy shield system. Maybe you have a booster system to make you move quickly. Things like that. This determines how many of those systems you can put. Likewise, these mechs have a stability rating. Stability tells you how many weapons you can wield given how powerful they are. Basically, a stability rating determines how good your mech is at like absorbing recoil or impacts. And so as a result, if your mech has a low stability and you're firing a gun with a higher stability, you need to slow yourself. If your weapon has a stability requirement of equal to or lower than your stability, don't worry about it. You can fire on the move, there's no real thoughts, you're fine. However, if your weapon is firing and it's up to twice the size of your mech stability, twice the value of your mech stability, so let's say I wanted to fire a field gun with a stability requirement of, and this is where we open it up because I want to make sure I got this correct, stability requirement of 2, and as we just mentioned, Paul's character's mech has a stability of 1, this would be double. That means that Paul's character would need to stand still to fire the weapon safely. Or, if they fire it, they'd have to take a structure test. If they fail it, they might damage the mech. The recoil might actually throw it off. So, if they want to fire a weapon that's over 2 times their stability rating, so let's say a stability requirement 3 weapon, there's no safe way to fire that weapon. It will always potentially damage the mech. They'll have to take a structure test every single time they fire it. And if they fail, they will take damage, or be knocked down, or battered about, what have you. So your modularity determines how many system slots you have available. Paul's mech has a modularity of 4, as we can see right here. So, that means Paul can only fill 4 of these 6 system slots out. And that's how we sort of got around the whole, how do I make the equivalent of a size system here? Modularity is largely the key. Your character can always have their mech holding a weapon, but they would still need to be able to have enough slots to use it. So even if your mech has like manipulators or something, they would need to have a system slot available to connect the weapon to its power supply and use it efficiently, if that makes any sense. So, that's a lot of what I've been working on as of late. And I figure at this point we can open up the area if anyone has any questions or wants anything that they want to address directly, whether that be on the granularity of, like, making a mech or making, like, the game, any questions they might have. Now's your time. I have an open floor, and I'm willing and waiting for anyone to ask their questions. So, this is basically what I have been working on. It's been largely finishing out all the stuff on Construct so that I can move on to the next project. The next project being probably hacking modules. I've already got most of that already squared away. I just want to get a little bit more done so that I can have some more diversity and finish fluffing out the different attack programs that exist in the game. So, if I were to go down to the hacking software right now, we're just going to zoom out a little bit. So right now I've got a total of 4 hacking modules in the game players can use to... These are basically the equivalent of, like... I'm trying to find a way to explain this. Imagine a hacking module is like the Yu-Gi-Oh! Card battling gauntlet. I know, weird comparison, but follow me on this. The way that a hacking module works is simple. It has a certain number of card slots on it for you to put your actual software into. That software is basically run on the actual gauntlet, in this case the hacking module's internal computer. You're not typing really, really quickly to hack in Legacy. Instead, you're using pre-written hacking algorithms and programs as attack dogs. And once you have someone in your sights and you have a lock on their system, you have a direct line of connection, you feed attack software into their computer. You throw viruses and code at them, and the viruses and code do the thing. So that's how it tends to work. You're rolling your firmware bonus in your hacking software. That represents how well your character has deployed this particular type of, like, software, or their take on it being particularly potent or less potent against the software of your adversary. So it's not like I'm tappity tappity tap, I'm in. It's more of a... I use my hacking module and I go, go, mouse program, and you get the effect. You don't have to say it out that loud, but that's basically the idea. So, literally spellcasting with hacking. So, right now, in addition to the 4 hacking modules that I have in the game, we've also got 3 programming languages. We have intrusion software programs, which are all quiet, difficult to trace, super subtle attacks at most. For the most part, it's actually about sneaking and observing more than it is attacking. If you do directly affect an opponent, it's more about debuffs, and they're not super huge debuffs. A lot of intrusion is designed so that when you're hacking your opponent, they don't know you're there. You can be actively cloaked, and you could be ramming code up their beehole, and they still might not realize they're being hacked because it's very subtle. And so things like being able to look through their sensors without being observed, the ability to, like, turn on, flicker their lights, or flicker their, like, anything on board them that might make light or make them obvious, deploy flares, stuff like that. Making it hard for them to see by futzing with their programming and their software that helps them lock onto targets, or literally having their internal, like, structures just dump a bunch of poison. The next is subversion protocols. Subversion protocols are loud but difficult to trace. When I say loud versus quiet, I mean how obvious the effects are. So a loud program is one that you clearly know you have been hacked, but in this case, they're difficult to trace. Subversion is about seizing control of an adversary. So these are things like the ability to eject pilots out of their hard suits or their mechs, the ability to grab control of an enemy's gun and turn it on someone else, the ability to disarm them by ejecting the fuel cores of their weapons or ejecting the ammunition hoppers, literally making the gun lock up, and all leg lock, literally like rooting someone in place because you've sealed the hydraulics on their armor that allow them to move in their mechs or their hard suits, or puppet, where you can literally sort of grab them and move them around as people. Not just get single control, but actually on an unconscious or dead NPC, literally, like, assume control over it. So, like, Puppet allows you to do that with, like, just kind of one target for, like, one round. Lich lets you do it for 30 minutes. So, like, this gives you an idea as to how powerful Subversion is as a protocol. Think of protocols as like schools of magic, and you're really not far off. The final one is Vandalism. Vandalism is loud and easy to trace. Your opponent will know they've been hacked, and they'll probably be able to find you afterwards. But the good news is, Vandalism does exactly what it sounds like. It's a brick through your window. It's not a quiet, subtle infiltration of your systems. It's not some smart, clever way of handling something. It's, I'm gonna blow you up with direct industrial sabotage and whatever your equipment is. So Molotov, literally make your opponent's radiators turn off or dump heat into them. Make their mechs and their guns overheat and burn their hands. Barrage literally lets them just like repeatedly damage them with constant like impacting attacks. So like are someone in a hard suit, maybe you grab control of their hydraulics and just crush them repeatedly in their own hard suit. Or you make their gun actuate into their hand, which damages your... If you ever put your hand in the breech of a gun when it fires, that's a great way to break your fingers. Stuff like that. Overload. Create an electrical surge. Anyone familiar with Mass Effect's Overload program? It's basically that. And then finally, there's Phoenix. Phoenix is fun. It's not exactly what you'd think it is. A lot of people think, oh, that's a resurrection ability, right? No, that's what Lich does. Phoenix instead causes someone to explode in a fireball if you succeed. Basically, on a successful hacking attempt against an NPC construct that is currently overheating, so they have to already be hot, or any other NPC target with over 15 thermal points on them, which is a lot, you may instantly destroy the target. They just die. Just bang. A construct detonates as if suffering a going critical result on their radiator chart. Anything else detonates in a small blast radius, applying as many thermal points as the initial target had on them at the time of death to any caught in the blast radius. So you blow them up. Boom. Crater. And anyone nearby gets caught in the blast. It's quite fun. This is what I want to focus on fleshing out next. Hacking is very fun. I want to solidify it. Already some of the terms in this are outdated, and I made a lot of them this year. So like as an example, the Phoenix program references a construct detonates as if suffering a going critical result on their radiator chart. Well, constructs don't have a radiator chart anymore. So I need to clarify what that does in the future. But there are, like, that is a special rule that constructs have where they can blow up. So I need to, like, clarify where that would go, where to reference it, that kind of thing. So this is a lot of what I've been doing, folks. It's not that I don't have the actual rules written, it's just now I gotta get them all to sing in the same choir, and I have to get them all to be reading from the same playbook, referencing the same exact language. Make sure it's all up to date. Unfortunately, this is part of the design process that everyone has to do when they're doing TTRPGs if you have a long-term project. I've been working on Legacy for, God, 20-odd years now, longer than. And so I have 20-odd years of notes to collate and get together to make sure that they're all from this edition's language and referencing this edition's rules. And it's a lot, but it's been fun so far. That's basically what I've been working on. So, at this point, I've given everyone plenty of time to ask any questions they wanted to ask. We're getting towards an hour in, an hour and a half in, and I think this is probably where I'm going to cut it. I can feel my voice starting to get a little scratchy, it's cold outside, that kind of thing. So if anyone has any last-minute questions to ask, I'm going to give like a nice 2-minute window for anyone to ask them or type them. But if I don't see anything, we're probably going to call it here so I can get back to work. But regardless, I do want to say thank everyone who's been tuning in, paying attention, asking questions. Again, like, subscribe, slap those buttons. Please, I'm a tiny channel, it helps us grow. So, let's see. Favorite weapon so far? That's a tough one. I would have to say, out of all the weapons I've made, my favorite weapon overall has probably been... It's not even a weapon that's currently in the armory. It would probably be a storm weapon. So storm weapons, literally with the storm keyword, when you make an attack, they make a single attack roll. But then whatever the number behind the number storm is, so storm 2 as an example, every time you hit someone, you roll that many you roll damage that many times. Basically, it takes that many bullets and condenses them into a single roll to hit. So if you miss with multiple hits. But if you hit with multiple hits. And it's a great way to just sort of stack damage on someone. As you're firing a gun with a firing rate so fast, it's not even measured in a rate of fire. It's just, I pull trigger and you get hit that many times. So, I'd say that's probably my favorite of all the weapons I've made. It's just a really fun, elegant, rule, and it's a really fun weapon. And it's just enjoyable. I have frequency blades and plenty of other stuff too. Collider gauntlets. I have a lot of favorites. And I'm very excited for you all to see all of them. But we'll get there when we get there. In 2 weeks, I'll be checking back in with you all again. Just gonna check this to make sure. Yeah, the 27th, I'll be running another stream that weekend. And I'll let you guys know what I've been up to after the Christmas break. So, everyone, take care. Have a good one. Huge thanks, as always, again to my incredible patrons. Patreon.com/TheLastOmnitect. If you want to help me make these things, you too can join the honor roll of my incredible patrons at Tier 1 Ampersand, Heinrich, and Atlas, at Tier 2 Necrodamus and Souls Rolls, and at Tier 3 Mossy the Mighty. Everyone out there who's been subscribing, you guys are incredible. You are literally the only source of income I have from this entire damn project. Thank you all so much. Truly, you are the wind beneath my wings. Please go again, patreon.com/TheLastOmnitect. You can read my entire webcomic catalog there, and continue to get them if you're subscribing 2 weeks early. You'll also gain access to exclusive art and behind-the-scenes peeks at Legacy and my other projects as they're made, and furthermore, you'll get to directly engage with me, plus a special role in my Discord. And at very least, give it a follow. I post all my news, including my schedules, and what I'm up to there as well. Plus, you can only need to be a subscriber in order to read my webcomics. It just lets you read them early. So, take care, folks. Have a good one. And I will see you all out there. Peace, Voyagers.